6 viewers waiting already. So are you ready to go?
We good?
Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome. Welcome to DenverScript. Better mask that up. Or not mask, you know.
I sent you the link, by the way. Did you see that?
Yeah, I posted it.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Well, these aren't possible without our sponsors, so thank you, CoTalent, for sponsoring the venue. If you don't know what that means, this is the venue. That's where you are. It's CoTalent. If you're looking to find talent or find work, please talk to them. They're really awesome. Actually, my current job during the pandemic, they found me my job. Totally recommend. Quizlet.
Okay, sorry. Stand just enough in the screen. Yeah, so Quizlet, we do have an office here in Denver. It's an online learning platform. Think of it as like digital flashcards for, like a different way of kind of learning. So whatever you want to learn, Quizlet probably has a set created by someone, or if you have something new that you need to learn, create it, share it with other people. We are hiring here, San Francisco, New York, I think. Feel free to talk to me or go to quizlet.com/careers to sort of see what's open. We're hiring engineering, product, design. So if you know someone, let them know.
Tonight's schedule. It's basically intro, job announcements, and what's going on in JavaScript land. Sadly, our short presentation had to cancel for tonight due to a house emergency. He will be speaking another time. So if you came for TypeScript 1, sorry. But we got Bill here to talk about Vue. So we are an open collective nonprofit. So we do take donations. That goes to doing our meetup account, trying to get equipment. So our streaming isn't another laptop. So please, anything helps. Garrett has been a long time. Actually, Garrett too couldn't make it tonight. He's been a long time donator of $5 a month. Quizlet kind enough to give us $250. And Jake, we have a recently new person contributing for $5 a month. Is Jake here? There's Jake. Hey. Thank you, Jake. You too could also be awesome like Jake and Garrett. Just saying. It'd be on a slide. Well, I won't bother everyone with this, but if you are interested in anything about submitting a talk, knowing our code of conduct, contributing to our open collective, any of that, just go to DenverScript.com. Basically a link farm to all the things. All right, what's going on in JavaScript land? Woo!
All right. I'm trying, by the way, do you mind in the meetup group linking to the, if you're like in the meetup group trying to get to the... Sure. Thanks. We had a comment. All right. What's going on in JavaScript land? Welcome back, everybody. Decent turn on here. I'll come over this side. So, okay. So we do this every month. For those that are, I like asking this. Who's new here? Wow.
Shit, yo.
Wow.
All right.
Okay, it's awesome. Mostly new people. Hello, welcome. All right, so what's going on in JavaScript land? So since most of you are new, every month we talk about the things that we're excited about, what's going on in JavaScript land. We usually start if there is a Chrome DevTools that has come out, a new Chrome version. We talk about some of the exciting features there to kind of kick off the conversation, because that's what I get excited about. As always, what we'll do is we have a link to the highlights video as well as the release notes. And Matt always does a really good job of, as you guys share some stuff that you're excited about too, he'll add relevant links and things, so don't feel like you need to scramble and write everything down. He'll share it in the comments section of today's meetup. So, Chrome 93 came out, and new DevTools is out for that as well. Fortunately for all the new people, not anything super mind-blowing this time. Usually there's like a few more things at least that we want to talk about, but there's a couple of cool things. If you type string into the console, you can now right-click it and copy it as JSON or an HTML element or its literal itself. There's updates to Lighthouse. There was a few other things that are really, really low level that didn't, and there were also experimental features. Didn't seem like it was that relevant to share. If you're curious about some of those experimental features, you can check out the video and they show all those different things. So that's what I'm excited about in JavaScript land this month. What about you guys? And now, this can be anything from as high level as overall software development across languages to JavaScript specific to like new things coming out in the framework that you work in. Or it can be things that like doesn't have to be new at all. It could be like I always say, like on was it like CBS reruns? They used to say like if you haven't seen it, it's new to you, right? So like if it's something new that you just discovered that you're excited about, or even just you were like hacking on some bug and you finally figured it out and you're working from home by yourself and there's nobody to high five you, like you're in a room of people now that understands and appreciates. So like if you just like had like a really cool moment, there's like a high five moment that you want to share, you're among your peers and we'd be happy to celebrate with you. So what are you guys excited about? Oh, there's people putting comments in the chat too, so I'll check that out as well.
I see Cass, and that's about it.
Oh, it's just people saying hello to each other. Okay, but for those of you in the comments, so we've got Cass, Coding Garden with CJ, Cheddar is here. Thank you all for joining us. Other people that are joining, feel free to say hello, and maybe we'll do some shout outs. This will be kind of interesting. This will be like if we're doing like a live stream, which we are. We'll say hi to some of the people who are joining in the comments too. Well, we've never interacted with people because we've never actually had people in the comments during the live stream. Ever.
You're making us sound really lame.
No, I'm making us sound like we are an evolving company that used to do our meetings all in person, and now we're moving to a hybrid model. We have some people joining us remotely. Matthew. All right. So if you have any questions or things you're excited about, for those that are viewing at home, please let us know. I've got my phone up. And Cheddar didn't realize it was going to be in person again until right before it started. We're going to try and keep doing it every month, Cheddar, until we can't. So here we are. What are you guys excited about? Anything at all? It could be a thing you just discovered. What's up?
So I was working on my like blog with Gatsby.
Okay.
And I tried to basically turn it into a personal website. So I tried to, like have a top level thing and then link to a blog. Yeah, this is going to be fun for you to check this one out. So I found out that if you want to have like sub routes within a Gatsby app, you need to include an index file under that directory. So it would be like a blog directory within an index.js or whatever it is. And then like that's what then builds out the main component for your blog page. And you can also have
Like stop writing.
It's because I was waiting for this summary.
Oh man.
I don't have a summary.
Okay.
That was the summary.
So,
I don't know what else you want from me.
As you were working on Gatsby,
Right.
what resources did you find to help you get up and running on Gatsby that you liked? Was it just
So
their docs, or did you find any good
I
tutorials?
used Egghead. Egghead was pretty good. And then, yeah, just diving into the Gatsby docs, especially when I was like, shit, I don't know how to get these images to render. That was also a good spot to just sort of start to get all the, like, the plugins and stuff.
Awesome. Cool. And then last thing for those that are new in the audience, what is Gatsby?
It is a static site generator.
Yeah, that's the
Thank
elevator
you.
pitch. Yeah.
I think he nailed it. We'll leave it at that. Okay. What are you guys excited about? Hey, thanks, Mike, by the way. I appreciate it. Yeah, what's up?
So I started working with this new. So everybody's heard of like Google Sheets, Excel, etc.
Yep.
So Airtable is like that, but for developers. They have a really cool UI, and what's dope is their documentation is written in either curl or JavaScript.
Okay.
And it's dynamic based on the tables and relationships you create.
Oh,
So if we create a customer's table, the documentation will generate for if you were trying to hit the customer's API, like it actually real-time change for you, which is really cool because we do documentation for them. So yeah, Airtable is spreadsheets for developers, and that's really cool with that.
sweet. And then it's Airtable's website, where to go.
Yeah, Airtable.com.
Sweet. Looks like Coding Garden has a couple. Lambda, a JavaScript-compatible language, was officially released. It has a front-end framework like features built in. Wikipedia and Wikimedia officially chose Vue.js as their front-end framework. Those are two different things that CJ is excited about. Technically, Coding Garden. We're not sure if it's really CJ, but Coding Garden is excited about these things.
That's
I know, it's a joke. Oh, and another one. CJ, you only get 3. This is your last one. And Microsoft and Google have collaborated to bring CSS modules to the web browser. Oh, IMBA? Sorry, it's called IMBA.
What are we talking about?
I don't know. So there's 3 different things. Ready? Go back to the top. Here we go. Ready? Let's rewind. We'll edit this out later. Okay, here we go. IMBA, a JavaScript-compatible language, is officially released. Now, IMBA. It's a front-end framework.
I'll figure it out.
Great. And then
Vue.js what?
Wikipedia and Wikimedia officially chose Vue.js as the front-end framework. And Microsoft and Google have collaborated to bring CSS modules to the web browser. As in, you can import CSS modules in JavaScript module files. Very cool. Thanks for sharing. All right, let's get a few more from our live studio audience. What are you guys excited about?
Just back to the Airtable thing. That did a hackathon a long time ago, and someone made a CMS out of Airtable. Yeah. Don't do that. we are now trying to go on Contentful, and that migration is terrible.
Come on, guys. Let's do like 1 or 2 more. Yes.
So we retrofitted our Jenkins build system with Bitbucket pipelines.
Oh, cool. How'd that go?
It went really well. It was super easy. The coolest part was that Jenkins having the power of a server is great because you could install all this stuff and run database migrations. But in Bitbucket pipelines, we sub that out with Docker solutions.
Okay.
So it just runs Docker for running database migrations with FileDB, and then it uses the AWS CLI to push everything into our system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken our build pipelines DevOps setup from like 3 days down to about 3 hours.
Oh, awesome. Wow, congratulations.
What did you retrofit it with?
Bitbucket pipelines.
Cool. All right. Let's do one more from our live group. Anything you're excited about? Yes. Oh, I thought you were in here.
No, she's a.
How about this guy?
Nothing? Come on. What was like a good way? Yes.
We spun up a new project recently. It's an Angular project and used a template called Fuse. You might have heard of this. Kind of popular. It's made it really, really easy starting a new Angular latest project. It's all the architecture done right, all of the resources that you need all pulled in, all the patterns, and really like customizable and stuff. And that has made my life super easy in the last 4 months. It's just, what is it, theme for something we got like $30 or something. But that was a big win starting on that project.
Sweet. And then for Fuse, was that just went to like just looked at Fuse Angular? That's all you need? Just
Yeah.
ready to go?
They also support React too. And
React.
I keep yelling at them to support Vue.
Nice. Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Last one, because CJ couldn't help himself. TypeScript 4.4 was released.
Oh, what?
TypeScript 4.4 was released. We're going to stop it there. No more CJ contributions for you. Thank you, CJ. We love you. All right, cool. That's what's going on with JavaScript land. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Onward.
Oh,
I think you did great.
I'm like, I can't see shit now. Let's take that off so I can stop on things
We
up.
also have this microphone that
I don't know. Can this entire crowd hear me?
we're not using. Well, I can hear you, but what happens if somebody's like coding?
Does anyone have any job announcements?
Hiring?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Please come up, use the microphone to announce your job.
Very good. Okay. And then also, for anybody doing job announcements, make sure you list it in the comments for today's meetup as well.
we did. We have some people. So we're here on behalf of DevIQ to support Bill, who's speaking today. So we have people streaming as well, watching,
Awesome.
participating. But DevIQ has multiple developer positions available right now. So we're looking for mid-senior lead on the JavaScript side, and we also have an Azure side. So we have plenty of openings, looking for talented and gung-ho people.
Awesome. Yeah, come on up.
All right. It's my first time here. I'm French, so I can't speak well. So I'm hiring a junior or mid-level, senior, doesn't matter, somebody that's super motivated. I'm the founder of CodeInspector. I'm going to change the name because it sucks. The goal of the company is to help developers write their code faster, and we start with JavaScript. So you have ESLint, but as you probably know, ESLint is painful to set up. There are a bunch of plugins and modules and configuration files. We want to make that super easy to do. So we're looking for somebody that is willing to work on static code analysis, that fix issues, and work in the cloud. So if you are motivated, you can find me on LinkedIn. My startup has been backed by Techstars. We already raised $1.2 million. So please come check me. It's Julian Bilange. So you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn. That's all.
Yeah. Again, don't forget to post a comment in the meetup, and we'll post it out again after.
Okay.
Anyone else have a job they want to announce? I mean, I might as well if I'm sitting here. So I work for Aetna Health Insurance. We have a Denver office, but we are also hiring remote. So if anyone is interested in working in healthcare, believe it or not, it's kind of important these days. We're always hiring, and we're looking for a couple of senior front ends. It's also DevOps back end, so if front end's not the jam, I'm sure we got something for you. So feel free to hit me up after this. Cool. Code of conduct. It's kind of weird we actually get to say this now because we're actually back in person. Who knows for how long? But what?
That's fine.
Wait, are you?
Am I?
Oh, no.
Back now.
Come here, code of conduct guy. Sorry, we split these slides and
That
I
was
forgot.
not being excellent to me.
Yeah, it is. I'm giving you a platform.
Thank you. Code of conduct. Be good to each other, please. We're all here to. They're all synonyms. Be excellent to each other. Just treat each other nicely. We're here to have fun, learn from each other. We can actually do this one. Be inclusive. So if you're talking to people, do like the Pac-Man kind of circle. So don't like close the circle off. Like keep it a little bit open so that more people can join in on the conversations. This is actually applicable now. This is great.
I feel like we need an illustration of this now.
I think we do.
Remind me later.
Imagine a pizza missing one slice. That's Pac-Man, in case you were unaware. But anyway, also no statement questions. So for our presenter tonight, don't like raise your hand and be like, that was good, but I've worked with it this way. That's not being excellent. If you have a question, raise it as a question. Don't tell the person that they just did this entire presentation incorrectly. Not good. We won't want you back.
Well, I'm very relieved to hear that.
Go to DenverScript.com for the full code of conduct. It's our link farm. Did you know that we have a website?
Yeah, I found out last month.
Honestly, we've had one for 3 years. And they keep forgetting. Also, don't judge. I did it in 2 hours. Also, in Gatsby.
What's Gatsby?
It's a static site generator. I thought you knew that.
Oh, there we go. I just words.
Oh, I forgot. There was one more. There is called speakers. We're always looking for new speakers. bit.ly/ds-talks. If you can't remember that, DenverScript.com, there's a link to it. And if you just not even sure if it's like a talk you want to give, feel free to hit up Guillermo, Mike, or myself on DenverDevs or through the meetup and just pitch us the idea and we can tell you how it might be received or how interested we'd be. But I don't think we've really the only time we've turned down talks is if it's a sales pitch. That's the only time.
And if you're a junior and you're feeling kind of intimidated, I know we all went through this process where you're just getting started and you're like, what could I possibly share? Short talk is a perfect opportunity for a junior. Share the framework you just learned. Share the library you just came across. We have, how many people in the audience are junior developers? Yeah, so we always have a few, right? So you'll have people, you'll have a captive audience, and that's just not even the ones that are also watching you going too. So, everybody's welcome to talk.
And actually, like the way I got into talking conference talks is I picked something I was interested in, give myself 30 days as like a crash course into it, and then make my presentation off that just to show like, allow me to show you everything not to do. And then that kind of is like, it's a very easy way to get into it because people can see like you're just getting into it, you're trying to give us like the easy way into whatever's the technology you're trying to present, and it's just a very gentle way to ease into it with a low pressure situation. So highly recommend. Again, Yerba, Mike, and myself, please reach out after the presentation or on Slack or Meetup, or I'm sure it's many other ways to get a hold of us. But again, thank you.
Yeah, you don't have to be an expert. They always say like the best way to learn a thing is to have to give a talk on it. So
That's how I do it.
yeah,
Cool. Awesome. Well, let's talk about Vue.js, Bill.
and we can actually say this now again. While he's getting set up, it'd be a great time if you want to get something to drink. There's drinks in the back. You can use the restroom while you get set up. So yeah.
No.
Oh yeah, similar.
All right, well, we just got over the biggest hurdle, and that's getting my stuff up on the screen. Yeah. It's been so many times when I show up and I'm like, all right, how do I get this
You
up?
want the mic?
You can just probably point it at me. I usually talk pretty loud.
Okay.
You don't have to wear a mask while you're presenting. I just wore it because these two just kept coming up, and I was like, all right, everyone can hear me with a mask. There you go.
All right, so I guess we'll get started. I know the short presentation I wasn't able to make it tonight. So I figure we can take the opportunity to dive into a little bit of the things. There was a lot of grooming process of me trying to condense this presentation down. So it would be cool. Feel free to ask questions or interject anytime if you've got questions or you want to take a look at anything a little bit more in depth and just talk about it. So today, this is an overview. I'm a huge fan of puns. I apologize for that. A little bit about me. So I am the AWS and JavaScript practice lead at DevIQ. We're located pretty close to Coors Field here downtown, and we're a boutique consulting company that builds web applications and web solutions for pretty much anything. I've been a developer now for about 10 years. I spent a lot of my career as an Angular consultant, and then DevIQ, one of the things that I loved about it was they were doing a lot of Vue development, and I really wanted to get into that, and that was a perfect segue for me. So as soon as I came to DevIQ, I got on the Vue bandwagon, and I've been there ever since. Before that, I was a mechanical engineer. I was working for the Defense Department. I got to work on ammunition systems and targeting systems and cool things that blew up. And, that's what I was looking to do when I moved here, and then the software market was so hot in Denver that I ended up switching careers, and here I am. I also I drive a white Mustang named Shadowfax. For all of you Lord of the Rings fans out there, you might get that. And yes, when I get in my car, I do say, "Run Shadowfax, show us the meaning of haste." It's kind of a thing that just happened. So, most of you probably have an idea of what Vue.js is. usually what I get is, I've heard about it, I've heard great things, but I've never really gotten to work with it, or I did a Hello World once and it was cool, but that's all I ever did. So Vue.js is a progressive framework for building user interfaces. It was created by Evan You, who was formerly on the AngularJS Google team. I think that's relevant because coming from the Angular world, I found it very easy to translate what Vue was doing because one of the creators of AngularJS ended up creating his own platform with a lot of the things that he didn't like about AngularJS. It's extremely lightweight. It's around 10 kilobytes for Vue 3. One of the cool things that we've done for one of our customers, they have a big Angular application, and they just didn't have the resources in order to continue developing features. So we came in, and because Vue is so light, we were able to build specific features in Vue, and we bring the Vue into their web application. And it's able to run very efficiently and not have a lot of extra weight attached to any of the functionality. So we're combining both of those worlds now in a lot of our applications. So Vue is gaining a lot of traction. One of the things that I think is cool is that on GitHub, it's got 188,000 stars, and that is more than Angular and React. Now, not to diss on React or Angular, React is still by far the most popular. Most shops are standing up applications in React, and Angular has a really awesome ecosystem with some really talented people that are working on it, and they've got a great niche as well. So Vue is one of those things. We just had an announcement today about, was it Wikimedia?
Yep.
They're starting. They've chosen Vue as their front end web application framework. So I wanted to quickly compare and do some translation for anybody that's come from the Angular world, comparing what an identical Vue application looks like. So anybody that's familiar with Angular, you can see we've got our component declaration here. We inject our templates. We've got our style declarations here. And then we're exporting a class that has our functions on top of it. In the Vue Options API, you can see we've got a specific place where we put our functions in the methods object. We declare data objects up in the return of the data, and we use the HTML template to define all of our HTML, and that gets processed through the Vue engine. So we'll look at a little bit of that as well. Before we go any further, I did want to bring up the composition API. The composition API was something that was released in Vue 3, and it also now does support Vue 2. But it has a lot of benefits. We're not going to dive into composition API tonight, but I did want to bring it up because this is the direction that Vue is going. And a lot of shops right now that are traditional Vue 2 shops, most of them are still doing a lot of the options API. But eventually we all want to be doing composition API, especially for things that need to be reused and components that need to be reused. It's very efficient for that. And the one thing I wanted to highlight about the composition API is that it has logical concern grouping. So in our options API, things can get scattered. You'll have something that's declared up top in data, and then that's used in a method down below, and then you've got some sort of HTML functionality or template. With the composition API, it groups all of those things together much more logically. So let's talk about reactivity in Vue, because I think this is one of my favorite things about Vue. The getters and setters are all invisible. But under the hood, they enable Vue to perform dependency tracking and change notification when properties are assessed and So what does that mean? When we have a data property, Vue knows exactly where that data property lives, and it manages those things through tags. And anybody that ever deconstructs the element window of what's rendered, you can see all of these Vue tags on all of the elements. So it takes those and it applies watchers to all those data elements. And anytime any one of those things changes, it puts it through a component render function. And in the virtual DOM, Vue is very good at reacting to those things and taking the shortest possible path in DOM manipulations in order to display whatever change you have. So the core of Vue, the great thing about Vue really is their reactivity. So computed properties are one of my favorite things about Vue and utilizing that reactivity. So computed property is a cached property that watches for dependency changes. And you can declare any type of computed property and you return a value. And Vue automatically detects what all of the inputs are into that computed property. And anytime one of those inputs changes, it's able to react and notify your computed property that it needs to bust the cache and update that property. So in this example, it knows that if message changes, then reversed message will automatically update. But you don't have to worry about going through a lot of nasty lifecycle hooks of continuously checking and executing this function to make sure that it's continuously up to date. So anybody that's worked in a modern web framework is probably somewhat familiar with a state management tool. In Angular, it's NGRX. React is Redux. And in Vue, we have Vuex. Vuex is by far much more simple than any of the other Redux or NGRX patterns. So it's also inspired by Flux. However, unlike Redux, Vuex mutates the state rather than making the state immutable and replacing it entirely with Redux's reducer functions. So under the hood, Redux is constantly creating new objects depending every single time you create a state. Vuex has one single mutable object that is constantly changing. This allows Vue.js to automatically know which directives need to be re-rendered when the state changes. Instead of breaking down state logic with specialized reducers, Vue is able to organize its state logic with stores called modules. So this is I would like to say it's simplified, but this is pretty much all you ever do if you're using Vuex. You've got your component, you've got your action that is dispatched by your component. That could be an asynchronous call to go fetch your data. Then you want to dump that data into your state, so you call a mutation. That then updates your state. And with Vue, because we just talked about reactivity and the ability to react to changes, anything in your component that is watching for that state property, it will automatically get that. So the other really powerful thing, and I want to spend a few minutes on the Vue router, because it is every single app I've ever used, it uses a router. So currently, they did upgrade the Vue router to Vue version 4 for Vue 3. We'll talk about some of the upgrade process if you're on an old Vue 2 application later. But some of the cool features that I want to highlight are the customizable history option and dynamic routing. So in the Vue router 3, which was used for Vue 2, they had this mode history, and that would track the history for your back button as you move through your single page application. One of the really cool things about Vue Router 4 is that this is now an injected function. And so you can inject create web history from Vue Router to get the exact same history functionality. But if you've got some sort of specialized history management where you don't want to necessarily track one page but you do another, you can inject your own function, your own customized functionality in that. And we actually had this come up where in the application that I brought up earlier, where we had Angular running at the top level, and then we had this Vue application that did its own routing for some of the features. And having the ability to eject out of the custom history functionality, because both routers, the Angular router and the Vue router, were managing history. So to be able to say, all right, Angular, I want you to manage the routes on the top level, and then the Vue, I want you to manage all of the sub-routes and the breadcrumbs after a certain point. This gives us the power to do that. Dynamic routing. So this is something newer, and I think that they liked it so much that they actually did put this in a later version of the Vue router, and an earlier version in the Vue 3 router. But this allows you to dynamically create routes inside your components. So you can see this is living in the methods of a component. And when, in this example, this is for file upload systems, right? The user is uploading files and you want to be able to route to those files dynamically. You can use the router.addRoute method in order to build out those additional routes that you may not know when you first load your project. So this is one of the basic things, and this is probably more of a tip because everybody uses root params. Right? You get a URL, you want to embed some sort of ID in it. In Vue, the syntax is :ID, and what that will do is when you load this component, that ID is then loaded into the route property. And you can always find and index it by calling this $root, .parameter, .params.id, or whatever the name of that root parameter is. What I would recommend doing with all of your root parameters is attaching this props true flag. And what that's going to do is then you can define in your component that there is an input property called ID. And so it gives you some flexibility, especially when you're reusing components. You can either grab that ID from your URL as you're navigating around, or if you reuse your component for something else, you can just inject that property like we inject any other Vue property into a component. It also keeps the syntax a little bit shorter because then you can just call this.id instead of having to index this big route object at the same time. All right, lazy loading. I originally tried to jam too much on this slide, so I figured we're just going to go look at a project and play around a little bit. And yes, that is exactly how I look when I'm coding all day long. So we're going to start over here. So this is our DevIQ Vue 3 boilerplate. This is just an application that we built that has a lot of our patterns and file structures and just existing stuff that we use to greenfield projects. So there's nothing super special about this other than it's just got all of our common patterns and shows new developers the way that we build scalable apps here at DevIQ. It's got some cool stuff in it, like the increment. This came, I know, straight out of the documentation, right? if we look at the Vuex state, so this goes through the pattern of dispatching an action that triggers a mutation and updates the Vuex state. You can see that number increments each time. So for lazy loading, going back to lazy loading, this is one key thing that I always see in a lot of greenfield projects of loading too much initially. And if you look at this application currently, we've got our app.js, we've got our chunk vendors that we're injecting. When I go to the About page, you'll notice that all of this data is already loaded. And that's great for a small application, but for large applications, we want to be very specific about what we're loading and when we're loading. So in Vue, lazy loading is really, really easy. If we look at our route modules, you can see we're basically we're injecting everything all at once. This says, okay, load all my routes and put them all into the same Webpack chunk. But for the About page, let's say we don't want to do that. What I can do here is I can create an arrow function that loads this specific chunk and if we look at this, these file sizes should start to reduce. I think this one was originally 264 kilobytes. Now, if I click on About, click on About, it doesn't do it. Make sure I'm good to About. I forgot to import it.
Live coding.
Live coding. All right, so now we should see an additional piece of code. So let me go ahead and reload the home page. I'm going to click About. All right.
Checking all the boxes.
All right, so let's go back and try this one more time. So if I click on About, hey, look at that. We've got 0.js that now loads. Cool. We loaded dynamic JavaScript in a lazy way. However, as a developer, I hate when things say 0 and 1 and 2. But I get the computers are really good at that, but I'm not. So one of the cool things that you can do in Webpack is you can create Webpack comments. And by putting this in front, I just say Webpack chunk name, and then I can call it whatever I want to call it about. You'll notice that that 0 is now called about.js. So for readability purposes in lazy loading, it's really good to put those Webpack comments in there just to help your developers and keep things straight and be able to easily identify what is loading where. The other cool thing is that if you lazy load certain components and you name them with the same Webpack chunk name, it will actually group all of those together in the same chunk. So this was something that I also saw frequently, and it was continuously overusing VIF. And in our quest to keep dry code, and which stands for do not repeat yourself, in our quest to reuse our code, a lot of times we'll create these components that render different things depending on what the inputs are. And so you can see there's these four different components, and they're all running off of the type property, and the type is trying to figure out, okay, what am I? And if I'm this thing, then should I be a radio button? Should I be a selector? Should I be an input box? So the solution to this is using the view generic component. And what you can do is it just starts with component, and then you use :is, and you pass in the type. The way I like to think of this is the switch case for rendering out view templates. So anytime in JavaScript when you think, I've got all these properties and I want to do all these different things, and a switch case is a perfect solution for that, this is what I think of as being the right solution for doing things at the HTML level. So I created this cool component in our DevIQ boilerplate here that when you click this toggle type button, it'll change the type of this component. And so you can see it goes from an input box and it toggles it back to a button. So it's completely reactive. You can change it on the fly. And it's extremely responsive. If we go and look at this generic component, you guys can see what's happening under the hood and how simple this really is. You can see we've got this component called demo button. And when I click this button, I just toggle the type, and I just change the this.type property. And Vue is able to react and know that that's changed, and it instantly updates that component. The one thing you got to be careful about this, of using the generic component, is things can tend to be, as you start having differing input properties and differing emitted events, these generic components can start to get really long, because your input box needs a placeholder, but your button needs a click event. And it's okay to put all of those things on there, but just be careful if it starts to grow. You might want to consider breaking those out into different generic components or refactoring the code and so on. Yes?
What, maybe I'm missing, what type to what the component should change? So like is type demo button, so then where does it say that demo button changes? Does that make sense? Like, what is that? What is that attached to?
So demo.
Could you repeat the question to people on screen?
Sure. So I think the question is, what is defining that the demo button is actually changing into an input button? So there's a little bit of, I was actually going to bring up the demo button a little bit later, but now is a good time as any to show what this is. All you're doing is changing a string. This just needs to match the component name. And because it goes into the is property, basically all that does is it just creates a component called demo button, like that, right? And that's all it's doing. You'll notice I don't have an import here, and we will get to that later. So let's talk about upgrading your existing Vue 2 application. This is super simplified, but to talk through some of it, one of the things that I would do initially is if you've got mixins, you got to get rid of those. They're not supported in Vue 3. That was the original code reuse strategy, and Evan Yu even hated it when he made it, but he didn't really have a good solution to it at the time. Now the solution is the composition API. So anything that you have in a mixin, I'd recommend installing the latest version of Vue and installing composition API support, and then converting those mixins to composition API. So your process, in a super simplified way, is to call Vue upgrade, then npm install. Vue upgrade is going to update things. You want to make sure that your router is updated, Vuex is updated, and obviously that Vue is updated. Then you've got to create, you don't have to do this, but it's really good to create a Vue config.js specifically for the migration build. And that's going to give you a lot of hints as to the things that you need to update. So I included what that configuration looks like, so that when Webpack is serving this up, it's giving you information about the things that you need to upgrade specifically. And so once you serve your application, you can go through that process of looking at the console, and it should tell you, hey, you need to upgrade this, or this is no longer supported, or whatever. All right, some other tips. This is super obvious, but I see it sometimes. Use a linter and use preload. And if you're using VS Code, we originally had some problems where we had the linting rules in place, but VS Code has its own overrides. It's got its own configuration, and sometimes, depending on people are configured, those take precedent over what the checked-in prettier codes are. So I'd recommend upfront getting in your .vs code folder, adding in a settings.json file that specifically says use the prettier config and ESLint config for this project. And then it doesn't matter what you've configured in VS Code, that will override it, and make sure that everybody is checking the identical format in every single time. Wrap your standard HTML components with custom components and instantiate them globally. And a lot of times when we're hustling to get a greenfield project out the door, we'll drop in, a button element, and we'll just put all the tags in a button element, and it's just a generic HTML button, and then we'll put all the styles in that component for that button. But it's really good up front to take the time, and even if you don't have any custom functionality, you want it to look default, take the time to wrap it in your own custom function, in your own custom component. And I've done that with this buttons component here. So you can see this this is super simple. I've got a slot to inject whatever the text of the button is, and then I've got an HTML5 button here. And when I said instantiate it globally, it's kind of just a pet peeve. I don't like having to put all of these imports for components that I typically reuse multiple times throughout my application, so it's easier to just bring them in globally. In Vue, we can take a look at what that looks like. So in Vue 3, we create our app. You can see we're bringing in the router, we're bringing in the store, and then we can bring in app.component demo button, and that will instantiate it globally, so that in my previous example in generic, I don't have to have an import for demo button. It's already there. All right, use a state management helper function for pulling items into state. This is something that I like doing it because it keeps my code cleaner. I found without some explanation, people sometimes aren't fully grasping what it does. You can put your state management stuff in your component if that's easier for you. I'll show you how I like to do it. And when I say I like to do it, I'm totally ripping off Chris Fritz from the Vue team because he showed this to me and I thought it was super cool. So this is the only place where I import Vuex directly, and I bring in these different state components, the getters, the actions. And for my count computed, this is just a pointer to that state. And if we look at my test component, you can see I'm importing count computed from my helpers. And then I'm using the spread operator to just drop that into my computed properties. It keeps things a little bit cleaner and more isolated. I can test, when I'm running tests, I only have to test my state in one place. And if I want to reuse it, I don't have to continuously bring in all of these different properties. I find that it helps me to group things in logical concerns and have a certain mindset when I'm structuring my state so that I'm calling certain pieces of my state in a logical way that can be reused by other components. So questions?
I have a motion. I thought it was interesting what you said about wrapping generic elements and custom functions, and the way you were implementing that makes sense. I'm curious if you could expound more on the reasoning behind that, why that is important to you.
Sure. So it really is about reuse. Yeah, so the question is basically why wrap custom or standard HTML components with a custom wrapper, even if we're not going to do anything. Well, I find that it makes it really easy when you have an application that's then pulling this custom, this custom demo button, and all of a sudden your customer says, or your boss says, "Hey, I want the next button to be green." Well, now you've got a super easy way to come in and say, all right, make all the next buttons in my application green, right? Because you can just drop those styles down here in the style type, and then it updates it for your entire site. So it's about putting in those types of really quick hit architectures that will save you down the line so that you don't end up in a place where now you've got to go update button HTML on 18 different components, and you have to tell your boss that it's going to take you a day and a half. So this is just one of those quick hits that you can do to make it easy. Yes.
What's next? Is there a Vue 4 or what are you looking forward to?
So Vue 3. So the question was, is there a Vue 4 coming? Not right now. Vue 3 was just dropped in September of 2020, and in my opinion, it wasn't really ready for enterprise level applications until about January, which is when we built our first enterprise application with Vue 3, and proved that it was ready. So they're full steam ahead on developing Vue 3. I believe Vue 3.1 came out very recently, so there's a lot of really cool updates in that. But they're focused on Vue 3. Vue 2 is out for 3 years, I believe, before they started doing Vue 3. So hopefully we get another 3 years out of this one before we talk about Vue 4.
So follow-up question. There's a kind of a release cycle with Angular, major and minor, and even numbers and odd numbers. Given the fact that this founder came from the Angular world, what's his take on releases and support?
So Angular's kind of the oddball. I know Angular targets releases every 6 months of a major version number release, and I think it's cool. I think it's probably a little bit more hype than anything. If I had to pin it down, the major versions of Angular were Angular 2, Angular 3 was super cool. That's too much of an example. Angular 4 was pretty major. Angular 6 was pretty major. And then there was a ton of stuff in Angular 9 when we started introducing Ivy and tree shaking and stuff like that. That was a huge step up for Angular. So not all Angular versions are created equal. And I think Vue is much more trying to stay locked into their versions and really create that true traditional breaking changes type semantic version. Questions? Yes.
Yeah, so with the like breaking changes, like does that mean if you have like a component library like V2, that's still work in your V3?
For the most part,
Yeah.
the syntaxes are very similar. I mean, they both use the options in PI. So it's not too bad of a lift. A lot of the changes are under the hood. Vue 3 functions very differently than Vue 2 does. Vue 3 is half the size of Vue 2. So the syntax is very similar. Vue 3 lets you do more things. Like in Vue 2, let me see if I can find a good example. Yeah, in Vue 2, you couldn't do this. In Vue 2, it would yell at you if you had more than one root element, but in Vue 3, it does not care. So for the most part, if you're going through that upgrade process, follow the instructions on what Webpack is telling you is broken. But it shouldn't be too bad of a lift as long as you're not using too many mixes and things like that. Yes.
So if you instantiate all of your components at the top level, how does that impact like the size of the bundles that you have? So if I have a button that's only used in like a certain code path and I instantiate it at the top, does that get shaken out of the other ones?
So, I mean, if you instantiate it globally, it's available globally. Right? So you're not going to have a component that doesn't have access to that. But you can get more specific. Like if you have a certain parent-child relationship and you want to have scopes to certain components, you can do that. Cool.
I don't think we have any. Just checking the chat. No questions there.
So here's some of the stuff I used to put this presentation together. Thank you all for listening, and feel free to ask me any questions you have on Vue or DevIQ, or I could talk your ears off on AWS infrastructure too if you're at all curious as well. Woo. All right, thanks everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bill. Feel free to stick around, have a beer, water, whatever's your jam, and nerd out.
See you next month.